Currently, the Finnish military feels threatened by Russia and is focusing all its efforts on strengthening its military power. Finland is immediately increasing its reserve forces by over 1 million people. They are considering making about 20% of the entire population part of the reserve forces. Today, let's take a closer look at this topic. Let's get right into it. As you all know, after the war in Ukraine, Finland joined NATO. When you look at areas bordering Russia, it's clear Finland is very concerned about the Russian threat. Finland raised the reserve enlistment age from 60 to 65 to prepare for the military threat from Russia. Antti Häkkänen, Finland's defense minister, said the new reserve law effective January 1, 2026 will add about 125,000 reservists, keeping the force near 1 million until 2031. Finland is a conscription country where all men over the age of 18 are required to serve in the military. Women can also serve if they volunteer. Conscripts serve for 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year, depending on their branch and training program. This Finnish reserve reform extends private reservist service to 15 years, making it easier to understand as serving 15 more years in the reserves. The period for non-commissioned officers and officers is extended by 5 years. Finland naturally feels threatened by Russia, not just due to recent events, but because its history shaped this perspective. Finland was a country that fought directly against the Soviet Union during World War II, and the consequences of that were by no means insignificant. During the 1939 Winter War, Finland resisted despite being outnumbered, but ultimately ceded about 10% of its territory to the Soviet Union. This experience deeply impacted Finnish society and marked a turning point, making them view Russia not just as a neighbor, but as a constant potential threat. After that, throughout the Cold War, Finland maintained a neutral stance, but that neutrality never meant disarmament. Finland chose peace, but at the same time, it was a country that prepared for war. That's why they kept conscription, carefully managed reserves, and maintained a structure for nationwide mobilization in emergencies. However, this long-standing balance began to be completely shaken after the Ukraine war. From Finland's perspective, the Ukraine war was not someone else's story. The very fact that a major power sharing a border ignored international law and sovereignty and carried out a military invasion completely undermined Finland's existing security logic. Russia was no longer predictable, making it clear that diplomacy or neutrality alone couldn't ensure security. Finland joined NATO and began a major defense policy overhaul, now viewing defense as a national survival strategy rather than just a departmental policy. This change was first revealed at the border. In December 2023, Finland completely closed its eastern border with Russia. The reason was clear. It was determined that Russia was systematically directing migrants from the Middle East and Africa to the border, destabilizing Finnish society. The issue of migrants may seem like a matter of humanitarianism, but the Finnish government defined it as a clear hybrid attack. It means using people instead of guns and tanks to provoke social conflict, paralyze administrative systems, and encourage political division. In fact, hundreds of migrants suddenly gathered at checkpoints near the Russian border, and it was analyzed that many of them traveled through routes that are difficult to explain without the acquiescence or intervention of the Russian authorities. The Finnish government feared internal destabilization before any conflict, so it took the strictest European Union measures by fully closing its eastern border and stopping movement with Russia. This was a declaration to safeguard long-term security despite short-term inconvenience. At the same time, Finland significantly increased its border management personnel and strengthened the cooperation system among the military, police, and border guards. So, there has been a clear shift in direction to view the issue of migrants not as a matter of welfare or social policy, but as a security threat. In this process, the Finnish government refrained as much as possible from directly criticizing Russia in diplomatic terms, but internally it began to actively operate scenarios that considered Russia as a potential hostile nation. In response, Finland is also working to strengthen its national defense by introducing anti-tank weapons and missile assault rifles from Sweden. Finland has about 5.6 million people with 1 million reservists, so 17 to 18% of the population could quickly serve as soldiers in wartime. Petteri Orpo, Prime Minister of Finland, told the Financial Times on December 16 that Russia will remain a threat even after peace in Ukraine and could move military forces toward the Finnish and Baltic borders. Of course, as of 2024, Finland's defense budget is at 2.4%. In the case of the Baltic states or Poland, it's already close to 5%, so Finland seems lower in comparison. However, Finland is also doing its best to increase its defense budget as much as possible. Finland's economy is struggling, and the European Union has started an excessive deficit procedure against it for not reducing its fiscal deficit. Welfare spending has been continuously increasing, and recently, defense spending has also risen significantly, which has worsened Finland's fiscal situation. However, Finland's fiscal deficit as a percentage of gross domestic product was 0.8 in 2022, 3 in 2023, 4 in 2024, and is projected to be 4.5 in 2025. The European Union's fiscal deficit cap is 3% of gross domestic product, but Finland's is 4.5%. The European Union's open warnings show how serious the situation is. Looking at it this way, Finland's economic growth rate this year is expected to be only 0.1%, so they're also experiencing an economic slowdown. But with the threat from Russia right at their doorstep, they can't reduce their defense spending. Finland has announced plans to gradually raise its defense budget to about 3% of gross domestic product. This figure is well above the European average, and given Finland's welfare state structure, it's a notably aggressive choice. The Finnish government is prioritizing the defense budget even at the expense of reducing social welfare spending, and behind this is the geopolitical reality of being directly adjacent to Russia. Despite rising financial pressure, maintaining defense spending signals that security is prioritized over the economy. Finland has decided to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention, the anti-personnel landmine ban treaty, following the Baltic states. This convention is an international agreement that restricts the use and possession of anti-personnel landmines due to civilian casualties, but Finland and the Baltic states have made it clear that they cannot give up practical means of defense in the face of military confrontation with Russia. Anti-personnel landmines are seen as effective for limiting movement and delaying infiltration in Finland, with its long borders and forested wet terrain. This decision signals they'll put their security first, even if criticized internationally. Finland balanced humanitarian values and security, but after the Ukraine war, security clearly took priority. The Baltic states made the same decision, so this is a collective choice by countries bordering Russia, not just one country's deviation. Also, Finland's NATO membership is not just a matter of adding one more member country. This single decision has changed the entire military landscape of Europe. Finland joining NATO has increased the direct Russia-NATO border nearly ninefold. Before, the border was just in the Baltic states and part of Norway, but now all of Finland is a new front line. For Russia, the direction it needs to defend has expanded all at once from the west to the northwest, creating a situation where it has no choice but to disperse its troops and equipment. This change is not just about adding a new line on the map, but it is putting pressure on Russia to completely rethink its entire military strategy. On top of that, the nature of the Baltics has also completely changed. With Finland and Sweden joining NATO, nearly all Baltic coast countries are now NATO members, leaving Russia with very limited waters to operate freely. The Baltic used to be a space that the Russian Navy had to pass through to move westward, but now it has come under the surveillance network of NATO's Navy and Air Force. In a crisis, NATO could blockade the Baltic with joint operations involving Finland, the Baltic states, and Poland, making Russia's maritime movement, supply, and deployment much harder. Kaliningrad faces the most pressure in this process. As a military outpost isolated from mainland Russia, it is crucial for maintaining Russia's Baltic presence. After Finland joined NATO, this region is now like a fortress encircled by NATO nations. To be connected by land, it must pass through Lithuania and Poland, and both the sea and air routes have also come under NATO's control. This may not be an issue in peacetime, but during a crisis, supplies and reinforcements would be heavily limited. Russia is maintaining its presence by deploying missiles and air defenses in Kaliningrad, but this also increases its burden. Given this, isn't Finland now more than just a protected country? From NATO's perspective, Finland is a key axis of the Northern European front. It serves as a strategic base that can distract Russia's attention and put pressure on both the Baltic and Arctic regions at the same time. Finnish territory is located relatively close to Russia's northwestern military facilities, and it has very favorable conditions for intelligence gathering, surveillance, and rapid troop deployment. Through Finland, NATO can now detect Russia's movements at an earlier stage, which leads to an overall increase in deterrence. So the reason Finland is strengthening its military is not because of fear, but because of its role. Finland is establishing itself as a country responsible for defending not only itself, but also the northern flank of NATO. The expansion of the reserves and the reorganization of defense policy are more like preparations to fulfill this role. The more Russia focuses on Finland, the less it can concentrate on the Baltics and Eastern Europe. At this point, Finland is functioning as a strategic card for NATO, and this change is quietly but clearly shifting the balance of power around Russia. What do you think about the current situation in Finland? Please share your thoughts in the comments. That's all for this video. Thank you.